Okay, hello everybody. Happy Women's History Month. Welcome to the Humanities Lecture Series. My name is Aida Dargahi. I'm the Director of Humanities Lecture Series and Professor of Humanities at Foothill College. The Humanities Department Lecture Series at Foothill College presents public lectures, features artists and featuring artists and scholars from diverse disciplines throughout the academic year to foster art, culture, critical thinking, and wisdom. The overarching goal of the Humanities Lecture Series is to promote different facets of humanities to a general audience and provide perspectives that intersects with other facets of the human culture at large. In bringing together thinkers from across disciplines, we aim to show how the humanities can both inform and shape our individual and collective responses to the many challenges facing humanities in the 21st century. In the 21st century and lead us forward with a new self-awareness, a shared sense of purpose, and a sharper recognition of our vital connections to our multiple communities. In pre-pandemic days, our presentation would happen on campus, but now we are doing it via Zoom. Tonight, we're going to have 30 to 35 minutes of lecture followed by Q&A. Given the size of the audience, your microphones will be muted. Please type your questions and comments in the chat box. One more important housekeeping note. For those of you wishing to get credit for attending this presentation, I will ask you at the end of the presentation, type your name, your class, and your professor's name in the chat box so you can get credit for attending. So, as is a tradition with our lecture series, we sometimes invite former speakers to introduce new speakers. I am very pleased to ask my colleague, Dr. Tony Kashani, to introduce tonight's dynamic speaker. Here is Dr. Kashani.
Thank you so much, Professor Dargahi. It is an honor to be here once again as a spectator, as a participant, and perhaps I'll have some questions of my own at the end. Who knows? We have a dynamic speaker, to be sure, someone whom I've been impressed with for a long time, and I'm so pleased to see that she's agreed to speak at the lecture series. So I have Ms. Ferguson's and the bio here. I'm going to go ahead and read it for you. But I have to say, this could have been several pages because of her accomplishments, but here's a summary of her work. Tia April Ferguson is the founder of Purpose-Driven Connections Incorporated in Columbus, Ohio, which is a nonprofit organization that focuses on education reform and vocational rehabilitation. She is a graduate of Ohio Dominican University with a Bachelor of Arts in English and Philosophy and is pursuing a Master of Arts in the Humanities at Antioch University with a specialization in creative writing. She's a fantastic writer, by the way. Tia April is a writer, educator, and advocate that has worked on the National Workers' Justice Campaign with the Center for Popular Democracy and the Ohio Organizing Collaborative. In July 2020, she spoke before the United States Senate's Ways and Means Committee and has appeared in numerous national media outlets, for example, the USA Today, ABC News, and the Associated Press. As an educator, she established an independent school district with the Ohio Department of Education and received her Orton Gillingham literacy instruction training from the Institute of Multisensory Education. On a personal note, Tia April is a devoted mother of 3 minor children, enjoys activities that require creativity, and is a proud member of Sigma Gamma Rho sorority. After obtaining her master's degree, Tia April looks forward to continuing her studies and earning a doctorate with a specialization in social justice leadership, something that she knows something about. Without further ado, please take it away, Tia April Ferguson.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tony Kashani. I really admire you. I admire how you inspire me to keep on the path of being transformative. So thank you for that introduction. Good evening. I want to thank the director, Ida Dargahi, for inviting me to speak at Foothill College's Humanities Lecture Series, as well as the faculty, staff, and students and guests in this virtual space. Before I get started, please know that I'm the mother of 3, and my children are present with me at home right now, and my daughter's cat is very active, and I just now heard him, so I apologize in advance if Minnie Mac wants to participate in this discussion tonight. So let's get started. So with that disclaimer out of the way, I want to talk to you tonight about the power of language. And how the lack of proper literacy instruction can have devastating results to the individual and society at large. My hope tonight is that you will learn how America, specifically Black America, is in the midst of an illiteracy epidemic and what actionable measures we can take to change this tide. If you read my bio, you will see that I'm pursuing a Master of Arts in the Humanities at Antioch with a specialization of creative writing, because Dr. Kashani told you, right? I'm also a trained educator in early childhood education. And once again, the nonprofit organization that I operate focuses on education and vocational rehabilitation. So as a writer, educator, and advocate, I want to tell you a story. This story is going to center on Dr. Stephen Cartman's The Drama Triangle. I want you to see if you can recognize which individuals are the victim, the persecutor or villain, and the hero or rescuer. So here it goes. A young woman goes into the store with a 2-month-old newborn. The store clerk greets the young woman and goes about his business stocking the items on the shelves. A few moments later, the store clerk catches the young woman in the act of stealing a pack of diapers, and he physically restrains her until law enforcement arrives. Before they arrive, a customer offers to pay for that pack of diapers, but the store clerk refuses to let the young mother go, and she is arrested. In a perceived act of heroism, the customer starts a campaign to boycott the store. As a result, the store is temporarily closed, leading to the store clerk not being able to afford his rent and becoming homeless. Out of revenge, he starts harassing the customer and is arrested. The woman that initially sold the pack of diapers pleads for the customer to be lenient on the store clerk, because after all, he was just doing his job. Were you able to identify the young woman as the victim, the store clerk as the villain or the persecutor, and the customer as the hero or rescuer? Better yet, were you able to see how the roles switched? The mother became the hero. The clerk became the victim. And the customer became the villain. You may be asking yourself, how does this story relate to the illiteracy crisis and learning about actionable measures I can take in changing the tide? Well, this story is an example of how the drama triangle prolongs social dysfunction because the focus is centered on one's role to be dominant. At any point, drama or social dysfunction would stop or at least lessen if individuals took a step back and focused on the problem and came up with a resolution together. Illiteracy is a social dysfunction, and it is an issue that we all have a part to play in resolving. In doing so, it's important to understand the underlying factors that cause the issue and what life experiences we bring to the matter. In this way, the backstories of the young woman, store clerk, and customer were relevant in how they could have collaborated for an equitable resolution of responsibility and benefit. In this case, let's look at the backstory of the store clerk. If you like, you can think of it as the villain's origin story. This store clerk's name is Rick, and he is a 38-year-old single father of 3. All of his children are under the age of 10. And he enjoys working at the grocery store because it's the first time in his life that he has had stable employment. Rick was a part of the 83% of Black 12th graders that are functional illiterates. As the 2015 National Assessment of Educational Progress Report shows, only 17% of Black 12th graders are proficient at reading. In fact, Dr. Roxy Spoiler details in her book, Comprehensive Guide to Brain-Based Literacy Instruction, that 65 to 70% of all Americans, on average, leave formal educational settings reading below proficiency since 1992. And unfortunately, in my home state of Ohio, starting with the class of 2023, the reading standards required for high school graduation were lowered by the state superintendent in 2020, from needing to be proficient to now just competent. So essentially, you can graduate from high school in Ohio knowing how to read just enough to hold a basic job. This is Rick's life. In light of this information, perhaps you can see why he would not let the young mother go. You can see that his drive for dominance came from a genuine and realistic fear rooted in self-preservation.
Yeah.
Yes.
Could you please turn on your camera? So it will be more engaging.
Can you, I have the camera on.
Yeah. From the bottom of the page on the left, just click on your camera. Down there, very down on the left on your monitor. Mm-hmm. Yeah, start video. Okay, thank you. Sorry. Okay, please, thanks.
I apologize. The slideshow must have turned it off. So what I'll do is...
Yeah, no, you can have the slideshow too. Speaker, let me see, let me change.
I'll keep it like this. I apologize, I'll keep it like this.
No, let me put side by side. You choose side by side gallery, please. On top right. Side by side the speaker. Yes, this is side by side the speaker. So you can share your the screen. You can have the full screen right now. Just turn your slide in the slideshow mode. Go to the slideshow. Yes, we're having it. So we're good.
Can you see me on camera still?
Yes, I see you. No, I can see you now. Thank you. Okay. Sorry for the interruption.
Yeah, oh, you're fine.
Thanks.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that.
Sure.
So as I was saying, on average, think about that. Think about how since 1992, 65 to 70% of all Americans are leaving the formal education setting reading below proficiency. So think about Rick's life. In light of this information, perhaps you can see why he would not let the young mother go. You can see that his drive for dominance came from a genuine and realistic fear rooted in self-preservation. Then maybe you're asking yourself how a 38-year-old father of three could be and remain a low-skilled reader and writer. For this answer, we can look towards Sean Robinson's research in educating Black males with dyslexia. In this study and from his personal experience, he details how Black students, specifically Black males, are overly placed in special education for perceived deficits in intelligence that harms their long-term academic growth. As a former special education student, he suggests that this placement becomes a prophetic fulfillment because of how Black students are treated. The misdiagnosis of dyslexia for the lack of intellectual capacity is due to racist ideology and pedagogy that delays or completely circumvents early intervention measures that can be life-altering. Through my training in early childhood education, I learned that 83% of America's educators were white females. Furthermore, this demographic group did not believe they had a culture, but did believe that they had to teach their students from marginalized groups to overcome theirs. Although pre-service training teaches to educate through the lens of multiculturalism, students of color are still being told that who you are outside of the classroom is not being welcomed inside of the classroom. As such, Dr. Carter G. Woodson's theory in the 1933 Miseducation of the Negro still persists. Marginalized groups are not being educated in America, but indoctrinated to be subservient to the dominant culture. We need not look any further than the heated debate surrounding critical race theory to confirm that. One actionable measure that we all can take to repair the harm from miseducating Black America is becoming aware of how the brain reads. So when you see literacy instruction that counters that, you can speak to it. So how does the brain read? Let's go into this. Brain-based research shows that there are 4 language centers, and those language centers are located on the left side of the brain. These 4 language centers are the speech sound center, the sound symbol center, the word form center, and the context and meaning center. These centers are active during literary engagement. For dyslexic readers or those with dyslexic symptoms, the word form center in particular functions improperly. As a corollary, centers on the right side of the brain are still primarily making the letter sound correspondence necessary for reading, which is decoding, and writing, which is encoding. The whole word learning framework that has been utilized for over 100 years with very little variation is the identifiable culprit to America's decline in literacy. Emphasis on whole word language, or you may know it as sight word reading, mandates learning words as logograms or pictures, making literacy still dependent on the functioning located on the right side of the brain. As a result, the rapid movement primarily needed on the left side of the brain is significantly hampered. Research shows that the brain processes language sound by sound and not as logograms. So imagine still going back and forth between the right side of your brain and the left side of the brain, and how that is significantly slowing down your brain processing sounds, because that's what phonemes are, they're sounds. As such, you're not able to get a true grasp of phonemic awareness that comes through systematic, explicit, and culturally relevant approaches. This is producing a multi-generational cycle of poverty and crime in Black America the lack of it is. We have a joint responsibility to hold our legislators to account for all the schools to receive proper funding and educators being well versed in the multi-sensory approach to literacy instruction that emphasizes phonemic awareness. Now I'm going to date myself here. I graduated from high school in 1998. A few years prior, I want to say around 1995, 1997, Ohio was founded that their school funding was unconstitutional by the United States Supreme Court. That was the 90s. Largely today, a corrective measure has not taken into place. Ohio is still, their funding is still legally considered unconstitutional. However, the cause for education reform cannot solely center on children, but attention to Black American adults that are illiterate is crucial as well. Best practices in the educational field shows that children have higher rates of academic achievement when they are born into rich language environments. Consequently, Black American children enter the educational system at a disadvantage from this factor alone. As shown on the Ohio Department of Education's website in January 2021, Ohio's governor signed legislation requiring dyslexia screenings in preschool age children. While this legislation is significant in addressing the literacy instruction of all children, which is important, it falls short in addressing the ecological factors that Black American children face in terms of their home environment. America must come to terms with the weight it is putting on its Black citizens. Changing the tide of illiteracy rates with Black American adults is a crucial component in doing so. As such, I believe that the most important step needed in lowering illiteracy rates in Black America centers on awareness. So the second actionable measure that we can take is being aware of the crisis so it can guide our actions and interactions to be effective allies with the Black community. So what does effective allyship look like? Let's go back to our story. Let's go back specifically to our store clerk, Rick. How much more empathy do you have now for his intentions and motivations? How would this awareness or expanded perspective of lived experiences altered your initial impression of him? And while we do not excuse bad behavior or character, we can understand how these unfavorable characteristics develop to see individuals as human. No human is without error, and therefore no human is without the need of correction. So with this in mind, we have to deliver consequences with justice and not unjust retribution. This is the power of language. Language and literacy are synonymous for me because the mechanics of literacy, which is phonological awareness, is just one component of what it means to be literate. The building blocks for literacy are listening and speaking. So what I like to say is, if you can hear it, you can speak it. If you can speak it, you can read it. And if you can read it, you will write it. But it all comes from listening and gaining understanding to communicate with truth and power. For this reason, I believe literacy is the foundation of learning, because it is the ability to comprehend and convey meaning within a collective of individuals. Literacy or language is therefore the cornerstone of any society, because it is the driving force for gaining knowledge and wisdom to build empathy, so individuals can work in unison with each other. I had a child that was in the 6th grade, but read on a 2nd grade level. But once he was recognized for having dyslexia and had the appropriate standardized testing accommodations, his reading comprehension score showed that he read on a 12th grade level. So imagine being told that you are intellectually inferior for being taught to read in a way that brain-based research proves is counteractive. Living in harsh socioeconomic conditions and society at large micromanages your daily existence because of the skin you are born with. What would you think of yourself? What would you think of the society in which you live in? Under these conditions, to be Black in America and normal is abnormal. True allyship comes from deep introspection. It is the shadow work that America is running from. But allyship requires transformation from embracing the guilt to reach individualized reconciliation. It is recognizing that being a member of a dominant caste with historical privileges has caused one's dehumanization as well. My mentor at Antioch said something to me that was so profound that it clicked, because it was the first time that I ever heard it. He is a middle-aged Caucasian male. And he told me that when you dehumanize somebody, you dehumanize yourself in the process. At that point in time, those words were able to let me see his humanity in a way that I would not have, because I had looked at him as somebody who came from a privileged class, not looking at him as somebody that the system that we're born into in these United States dehumanized him as well. So America's normal is not normal to what it means to be a human. At the very least, it should not be. So what does a normal sociological model for conflict resolution look like? Let's return to our story for the last time for possibilities. In the case of Rick and the young mother whose name is Angela, we have apparent opposing forces that both act out of the need for survival. The thought here is how mutual understanding or empathy allowed Angela to see Rick's desperation and call for leniency in response. Perhaps her life experiences gave her the insight that the rise of costs in basic necessities, individuals are stealing items. And as a corollary, employers are putting pressure on employees to protect their goods. In this light, we can see the fourth row, the invisible row that yet holds all of the power, the triangle itself. Is it not the triangle that holds the structure for these players to stay in conflict? Is it not the triangle that has the ability to restructure itself into a more equitable circle? So an even exchange of ideas, beliefs, and values can flow within itself without causing the points of tension that the triangle brings. These questions are answered by critical thinking. And critical thinking leads to righteous judgments that are measurable to the circumstance at hand as they present themselves. In this scenario, a more measured response would have called for all parties being empowered to de-escalate the conflict. Rick could have realized that no job was worth his value and dignity as a human being. And thus the young mother stealing a pack of diapers did not warrant such a heavy consequence. The store customer, John, could have saw that his act of heroism was not holding Angela into account for committing a petty crime, and instead worked to involve himself in that manner that was more subdued and productive. And Angela could have used community resources before putting the welfare of her child in jeopardy by committing such a minor offense that could have major implications. I'm not going to give my own specific or balanced resolution in the story, because I want to leave that task up to you. And hopefully, in practicing critical thinking skills for conflict resolution, you will discover how many conflicts and contradictions reside within yourself, within all of us, and how these blockages hamper our collective ability to give measured judgments that are empowered by the society in which we live in. So, my third and final actionable measure that we all can take to repair the harm from miseducating Black America is to heal ourselves as individuals first. Now, this may sound strange, but just bear with me. The drama in the drama triangle originates when individuals come into situations looking to dominate to mask their insecurities. Healed people, or more accurately, individuals that are living in their healing journey, can see themselves as the victim, can see themselves as the villain, can see themselves as the hero, because they have fully integrated themselves to exist in the circle of resolution. Individuals that stand in this circle are problem solvers. It's not enough for them to state the problem and to restate the problem, for that's just recycling the drama in the triangle. They have developed the critical thinking skills that literacy builds. They are prudent, doing the right thing at the right time and for the right reasons. I'm not going to try to misguide you in saying that I have the key antidote to America's sickness, but I do know that a nation is a collective of individuals, and healthy relationships amongst individuals stem from healing parties working in concert with each other. There can be no repair to the harm from miseducating Black America if individuals have no intention of being fully accountable for what role they play in that drama. Because the truth is, we have all played the victim. We have all been the villain, and we have all been the hero. It is up to us as individuals within this society to do the real work necessary to end our social dysfunction. So I'm going to stop the slide here because I'm going to talk a little bit about my personal journey. Do you want to put me in speaker mode, Director Dergahi?
Yes, yes. It is. You need to put yourself, it's on speaker mode. It is. Let's see. It is on speaker mode.
Okay.
I can see you. Yeah, I can see you there as speaker mode. Yeah, go ahead, please.
So I always tell my children, if you're going to tell on somebody, you better tell on yourself first. So right now I'm telling on myself. When I was going through my certification training in early childhood education, I was asked to detail how I learned how to read. And I honestly didn't remember. I remembered just reading. And that was the dilemma when I came across loved ones that clearly struggled with phonemic awareness, because I had no idea how to help them. That is why I entered the educational field. Their lived experiences were so foreign to my own. In regards to literacy, that I couldn't relate to their struggles in a formal educational setting. My personality type has always leaned towards existentialism in language. So it's no wonder why I double majored in English and philosophy at Ohio Dominican. Recently, however, I learned from my maternal uncle just how influential my mother was to our family's literary development. My uncle credits my mother, his 9-year-old elder, for largely teaching him how to read, a skill he heavily relies on in practicing law. In fact, so great was my mother's influence on my early literacy instruction, I don't remember learning how to read because she started teaching me how to do so as an infant. This is the rich language environment that more Black American children need to be born into. You see, my mother believed and still believes in the power of language as the foundation of learning. So even though an educator from the dominant caste made her sit by herself as a form of punishment for my grandmother teaching her how to read by the third grade, she still passed on the legacy and power of literacy to her three daughters. And she is still doing so with my children and future students as the new superintendent of the independent school district I established in Ohio. My mother was able and is able to do all of this because her guiding principle is compassion. So although my brain does not naturally process sound in the same manner of an individual with dyslexia or dyslexic symptoms, as Tina's daughter, my proximity to their struggles has aided my understanding of their lived experiences. This proximity has pushed and will continue to push me to confront my privilege. I've had to learn to recognize my weaknesses and not just my strengths. How I can be arrogant, how I can be proudful and stubborn. This is the shadow work that I spoke of. It is confronting the parts of yourself that you want to deny and yet routinely emerge in toxic behaviors that keep social dysfunction in a cycle of perpetuity. At a certain point, we collectively have to get tired of our individual mess and resolve social toxicity. Illiteracy is just one component of that. But I challenge you to be your best selves, to walk in your healing journey to remedy the social ills that we all live in mass. Without knowing, my shadow work began December 3rd, 2019. I remember talking to my mother about the child that was growing inside of me the night before. This conversation is embedded in my memory because I carried the guilt of my words. If this child does not make it, it won't be a miscarriage like before. I would have to bury him. This became prophetic. In less than 10 hours, I found through the scheduled echocardiogram that my 6-month-old son fell asleep inside of me. In that moment, I felt like the victim. I felt like the villain. The process of delivering him revealed that I had an unknown, mysterious infection that nearly took my life as well. And as much as others tried to comfort me with well-intentioned words, proclaiming that his death was not my fault, the reality of the situation did put some blame on me. I did not take care of my body, my mind, and my spirit in the way that I should have. In trying to be the hero for everyone else, I was just avoiding and masking my own insecurities because I did not want to deal with them. As a result, I was miserable. And I caused harm to those around me. They saw me as the villain. Because I was hurting others. In confronting the ugly truths about myself, I made my son Michael a promise. I would love Tia first. I would be my most authentic self because only showing up as my most authentic self would I be fully accountable and responsible for how I showed myself to the world, how I would be. So yes, I can be arrogant because I know I have a fiery spirit to inspire others. Yes, I am proudful because I know what it's like to live in a low place, so I'm dedicated to helping others reach their highest heights. And yes, I am stubborn because I'm resilient. And that gives me the tenacity and strength to give to others when they feel that they are not. So as an educator, as a healing agent, I want to close these lecture remarks with a word of encouragement for the students at Foothill College. Learn all that you can here. and take this time to be transformative. In doing so, you will live with purpose that draws genuine connections with others. In pursuing a higher education, you are a light bearer that will repair other components of harm outside of illiteracy. And we need you to do so. Thank you again to Director Ida Garhi, the faculty, staff, and students at Foothill College for having me here tonight. And a special thank you goes to Dr. Tony Kashani in the audience in attendance. I turn this back over to the director. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tia. It was really an honor to hear all your perspectives and vision on literacy and all your stories. Thanks for sharing it with us. Now, I'm going to see, I'm going to ask the audience if they have any questions, comments they can ask our speaker. So let's read the chat. So you can type it in the chat. So we'll see that. Let's see, one new message. Yeah, you can check the chat. Yeah.
Oh my goodness, I'm talking and I'm on mute. I apologize.
Oh yes, I got you reading. Yeah.
I'm looking to see, I did not see a question, but I really appreciate your kind remarks. Can you talk more about allyship and how to be a good ally? I really do believe, and thank you for that question. I really do believe that in order to be an effective ally, you have to be kind to yourself first. And so when I talked about the shadow work that comes from Dr. Carl Jung, who is considered the founder of analytical psychology, and he came up with the concept of the shadow. And when individuals are able to, especially adults, are able to start to unpack all the behaviors that they learn how to be through their childhood, and they're finally able to confront some of the hard truths that the way that they were raised doesn't necessarily translate into the way that they should be. That's very hard work. And so the allyship comes from confronting your privilege. It comes from confronting that, yes, you can be the victim, you can be the villain, you can be the hero. But regardless of that, what actionable measures can I do? And that's an internal process that you have to be willing to face first.
Yeah. Yeah. Marla asks, can you elaborate on the connection between the drama triangle and the improving literacy in the Black community?
It's social dysfunction. If you do not have literacy skills, think about what your life outcome is going to be. You need literacy. And so when you have a group of individuals that have been leaving the educational setting since 1992, with approximately only 20% of them being able to read and write, think how that translates into their daily lived experiences. So if there is a real thrust towards truly educating individuals and making them engaged in the classroom, think about how the next generation will be able to move forward because they're being taught to read as the way that their brain works. And think about how that translates into children being born into rich language environments, which means that they have already an advantage for future academic growth.
Mm. Yeah, and somebody else asked, do you see a role for the graphic novel to teaching literacy in the Black community and using books from authors of the child's own ethnicity and racial background? That's a good question, actually.
Thank you for the question. It's very important. So my son is actually dyslexic. So the way that he became engaged in literacy was through graphic novels. So he's very much so into anime. And at a certain point, um, we have to not be so snobbish when it comes down to us educators, where we think of literature in terms of there's a classic form, and those classic forms are the only thing that's acceptable. At a certain point, reading is reading. You have to get them caught into reading. What's important to do when it comes down to those graphic novels, when it comes down to representation in books, you have to be able to teach the secondary layer of literacy instruction, which is the reading comprehension piece. So that's making sure that whatever they read, they're asking questions at the beginning, middle, and end of the book that are literal, that are inferring, and that are analytical, which are those big thematic themes. So whatever piece of literature that they come across, if they can't ask those questions, then that's where it becomes a problem.
Yeah, thank you so much. And then actually, I think Asha asked question. Oh, do you think the book Push does a good job of representing the experience of illiteracy in the Black community? Are you familiar with this?
I am familiar with the book Push. Thank you for that question. I think I read it in like one day. I sat down and got hooked on it. Um, I think more so than just illiteracy, it goes to deal with the trauma of what it means to be in a lower class system in America. So definitely the component of the lack of education, but also more so what I saw in the book was the devastation of trauma and how that is translated within the lens of the Black community.
Mm. Yeah, Falk asked, what opportunities do you see for local governments to supplement rich literacy environments?
In my, I'm located in Columbus, Ohio. So there was a grant that was given a few years ago when my sons were in elementary school, where the students were able to take books home. And so there was a huge push, I want to say around 2013, 2014, where it was just making books available to students. But here's a big component of literacy that you don't necessarily need a book, because it's the component of literacy that deals with reading comprehension. And that's actually vocabulary building. So as soon as you have a child, you want to start building up their vocabulary. So you want to make sure that they have print awareness. So that means just even holding the book. Those are all building blocks that will be that'll make it so much more easier when they get into formal educational settings, because they already have that rich language environment of just having print awareness and vocabulary building right there.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, I think you talked about it, but again, there is a question. How does literacy help one exit the drama triangle?
Because it builds those critical thinking skills. So critical thinking skills, once again, when you learn how to read, you should be asking yourself in questions before you read the text. So it should be activating your prior knowledge. You should be asking yourself questions in the middle of the text. You should be asking yourself questions at the end of the text. And those are those what, those W questions, the why, when, what, and where. So as you're reading, you're increasing your capacity to think critically. Critical thinking skills translates into you being able to make, to not only just act, but to think before you act. And it also expands your ability to be able to understand other people, because you're actually sitting down and having to think about what it is that you're doing. And that's what reading is. It calls you to think. It's not a passive activity. People think of it as a relaxing activity, but it's very much so brain-based, where you are literally taking sound and representing those sounds, which are called graphemes, into meaning.
Mhm. Yeah, sure. Yeah. Then what's your perspective on the intersectionality between different learning style and gender among children, specifically in the Black, I missed it, in the Black community? Yeah.
There's, well, we need more research. So even when I was doing a study, my studies at Antioch, dealing with dyslexia, Sean Robinson's research, asking for actually more studies about dyslexia in Black males specifically, it was the only bit of research that I could find. And I think his article was like in 2012. I don't want to misquote me here, but from what I can remember, it was a good term, a good distance from any present research. So right now there isn't enough research, but there is hope. There is hope with the dyslexia screenings in preschoolers coming about, with this legislation that passed just this past January in 2021. So hopefully with that, we'll be able to get more data to see exactly what the difference is, or if there is a difference in gender. Because from the brief study that I did, where there was, I want to say 36 participants, I did see that there was a gender gap in achievement. And from what I saw, it primarily had to deal with when male students were being taught to read largely from memorization or sight words reading. But when they had, in addition to sight words, which we call in Orton Gilliam read words, along with phonemic awareness, their ability to, their success in academic achievement, their success in illiteracy instruction was substantial. So there is a gap, but we just don't have enough information to understand it completely. I will say in short though, more males are more bodily learners, meaning that they literally process sound through their bodies. So in the Orton Gilliam, we use arm tapping because it's gross motor movement. And for whatever reason, that helps them to retain the information better. So when it comes to literacy instruction, you want to get it to where you're moving from the sound speech center and the sound symbol center into the word form center. The word form center is where you have that instantaneous retrieval. And that's where most bodily learners, it's a block for them because they're literally kinesthetic. They need to move their bodies in order to receive the information.
Thank you so much. It's really thanks for the questions and your brilliant answers. Alisa wants to I'd like to end our session with this comment from Alisa. Says, another comment I would like to make that is, I'm majoring in social science. I find topics like this very interesting. I am a white female that grew up with being in a good learning and reading environment. I do have learning disabilities as well. Having said this, I think it is super important to learn where other people come from and that people learn differently. Thank you, Alisa. Yeah, that's a good will comment. Thanks. And any comments, Thea, you want to add, or any ending notes?
Keep reading.
Mm, yes. Yeah, reading, actually my own personal, the very last personal experience with reading, when our son was a little, from day one, I would read to him regardless if he understands or not, when he was an infant. And the reading was very important, and our best activity was sitting together and reading books, taking turns. That made him to start reading when he was 4 years old. So this, keep reading. Yes, that's the best advice to our students. Oh, Dr. Kashani has his hands up. Please go ahead.
Yes. First of all, let me just say, Ms. Ferguson, brilliant work. You know, I mean, there's a lot of comments in the chat. I think everybody who attended was paying attention today, learned new knowledge about how history, circumstance, and culture shapes who we are. And sometimes we're victims, and sometimes we're heroes, sometimes we are villains. And those roles can change. And also my own personal understanding of language. When I came to this country as a teenager, I couldn't speak English. And the way in which I learned the language properly, if I may say, was through reading. I read and read and read. And, you know, so your recommendation, just keep reading, is absolutely spot on. And, you know, initially it's a process, it's a transformative process. It is so difficult because I would read these, you know, heavy, condensed books of all kinds, fiction, nonfiction, and so on. I couldn't find proper meaning to the words and so on, but I would get the gist of the book. But I wouldn't give up, and I kept reading and reading. And of course, that eventually yielded a new way of learning the language and translating all of that reading into spoken language, and then also the comprehension of whatever it was that I was doing, whether it was in the classroom or in a public setting, entertainment setting, anything. And I think that's the only way that we can have a portal towards a deep understanding of the human condition. We live in a visually saturated culture. You know, the visual language, lots of people are literate in visual language of the culture industry, but if they were to just engage in deep reading and then recognize that that fosters critical thinking. I'm just echoing what Tia is saying in the presentation. So I just wanted to thank you, and it was truly an honor to have been the person who introduced you today. And that's all I've got to say.
Well, Dr. Kashani, you're not getting rid of me yet, so.
I hope not, yeah.
Yeah. So thank you so much, and I'll end the meeting right now. Okay. Thank you, everybody, and I'd like to thank my colleagues and all the students who have participated here. And special thanks goes to our guest speaker, Tia April Ferguson, and Dr. Kashani. Thank you so much.